goal. However, if you look at your assessments for the operating budget within your towns, it is just a little bit of a tick below what the 5.15 would have done because we increased the revenue source. Superintendent Downing, we want to keep moving here.
So this is a slide to illustrate the reductions that the school district has made over the past 5 budgets. So my first year arrival was in FY22, assuming the budget that was prepared the spring before, and there were 510 full-time equivalency employees in our district. And after we go through the work that we showed you tonight, the budget workshop that was given on January 15th would have been 492 positions. After the reductions we made, it's 463.69. That is the reduction over 5 years of 9.1% in employees in the school district when we've had a decline in enrollment of 3%. So you can see the reduction in personnel is 3 times as great as the reduction in enrollment in the school district in the last 4 budget cycles.
So I want to point out something here, and I know that the conversation about one-time funds being used for ongoing costs is something that's relevant not just to the school district, but all 3 member towns as they're building their budgets this year and in the future. So in the blue, you can see what our operating cost is for the insurance. And then you add in the offsets that have been applied in those budgets, you get the total cost. What I want to illustrate here is that as the cost has gone up, this year in particular, we've really increased our offsets and we're using balances on accounts to help that. Not all of them, obviously, because we don't want to be irresponsible and drain accounts down to zero. But for some of those revolving funds, like our extended learning balance, like our school choice use, we did increase those to help lessen the burden that's being pushed forward into the towns on these assessments because of the increase in health insurance. And again, this is to illustrate the overall increase in the cost, but we've tried to be really sort of almost scrub each one of our revolving and each one of our potential sources in yellow here to increase those levers to help offset the cost to the towns on these increases. The other piece that came up at the beginning is the issue around special education out of district placements and the transportation costs for those placements and within our own district for students who use specialized transportation. What you can see in the blue column of the table is essentially the combination of what those placements cost and the specialized transportation over time. And you can see the major increases over the last couple of years. And again, part of that is due to the the OSD, Office of, Operational Services Division with the state that drives those increases, and you can see the impact there. The other impact in that column is the fact that we did do a new transportation contract for these specialized transportations last year. We went with the lowest bidder who met all the marks in the bidding, and our bid and our contract is actually run through Assabet Valley Collaborative because there's other districts that benefit from a collective bid. Over the summer, that company was not meeting the marks, and essentially that contract was canceled and we had to go with the next lowest bidder, which is obviously a higher cost. And there's some of that impact here. Every time a student goes out of district for placement, we obviously have to pay the tuition. Sometimes a placement will say, we'll accept the student with the provision that we also add these services or add this adult support for that student's school day. And that is not necessarily at the mandate of the Operational Services Division. That's a little bit more school to school, and that's where we see some of these extraordinary costs coming in. So the circuit breaker reimbursement that we've received each year is in that reddish column. We anticipate obviously that that's going to go up next year because our costs this year are up and what's qualifying will be met. Again, we hope that the special education transportation gets reimbursed at the rate that tuitions do at that 75%. But over the last couple of years, it's gone from 75% to 58% to we're getting 44% of our specialized transportation reimbursement in the circuit breaker program this year. There's levers and hope that at the state level that changes. But if not, that continues to not help support these increased costs and these mandates that we have to do for our most students in our school district that have the most high needs and that require the very best of us and the most resources to get their appropriate education. The IDEA grant is a special education grant. I know there's conversation at the federal level, what's going to happen with these federal grants. We're not hearing anything yet about that IDEA, the disabilities grant. Each year, we've used about $700,000 of that grant. We can't really increase that because the grant is based on the number of students that you have who are on specialized education plans on those IEPs. And our number of students is relatively level. So we don't get a larger portion of that based on our cost. It's based on headcount. So you can see when you combine the circuit breaker reimbursement available and the IDEA grant that we can really utilize towards specialized transportation and tuitions, that's the result in orange, and it does not keep pace with the increased cost in blue. So you can see from FY22 to FY26, there's not a big increase in that orange offset in grant availability. The remainder of that, which is the increasing blue area, is what falls into the operating budget and what is left for us to look at. And obviously there's impact on the operating budget as a whole and impacts assessments and things that we're able to do within the school district. So this is just a review. We put this up every year. This is your increase in operating every year. Again, if Mr. Boyle was here from Bolton, he would note that a lot of this was due to the fact that we had those Student Opportunity Act dollars coming in under the Chapter 70 umbrella that really helped reduce the increases on some of these things. And what we're left with is 5.28% and an operating budget proposed as of today of just over 70 million. This is essentially the budget drivers. I'm not going to walk through all of these, but I think it's worth noting that you can obviously see blue and red. Those are our salaries for our personnel and the insurance and benefits package, that goes into the school district. That is the majority of these things. So the result on the assessments, I'm just going to walk through. I know this is redundant language for some folks because you're well educated on the regional agreement. But the assessments are made up of the balance of the cost to educate once the state aid are applied. And there's three parts of that. Obviously, there's a local contribution, which is dictated by the state, the variable assessment, which is the calculation, and then we have obviously the debt assessment. I just want to let the folks here know that today I sent an updated memo to the town administrators and asked them to pass it along to necessary departments. That includes the updated bond number 2 for the high school and the debt assessment projections for next year, as well as the percentages from the high school enrollment. So the minimum local contribution is essentially just what it says. When we get our Chapter 70 numbers from the Department of Education, it tells us what our net school spending is. It tells us what our required contributions from each one of the towns is. And you can see over time, the required contributions have gone up, obviously, and some have paced differently than others. And that's based on the fact that there's that equalization value that gets applied by the state, which is made up of property value and of income from those member towns. So Stowe is maxed out at that 82.5. Correct, Superintendent Dunning? I'm getting my number right there.
Yeah.
Yep. And Bolton is approaching that. And then obviously Lancaster continues to grow on that. If you look at the increase, just for two examples, same school district, but two different towns between Lancaster and Stowe, is that Lancaster is going up and their required contribution, which is dictated by the state, by 500,000, and Stowe is going up by just under 100,000. So, and that has to do with that equalization factor that Stowe has already met.
Ross, if you can go back there for a moment.
Yep.
I just want to explain a point you were making in another way. So if you look at the FY26 number, you will see that the town of Bolton is actually, their minimum local contribution assessment from the state is about 1.7 million higher than Lancaster, yet the enrollment is nearly the same. And that's due to the equalization value calculations where Bolton is approximating it just over 80% and Lancaster is approximating just under 70% at 69.1, I believe. So if you think of it as $100, it costs $100 to educate a student. The town of Stowe would be required to cover 82.5% of that. The town of Bolton would be required to cover 80% of that, whereas the town of Lancaster would be required to cover 69% of that. That's part of the Chapter 70 required funding calculations that are provided as the requirements for minimum local contribution. I just wanted to explain that, the difference in those numbers there.
So the variable assessment is that remaining amount that is after those calculations is based on that 5-year rolling average. This is published in the budget workbook, and you can see what I've circled as the enrollment from FY26, which in that orange box or column is the 5-year total, which results in the other circled box of those percentages on the change in the 5-year rolling average, but that's what's applied to the variable assessment. As you can see, the foundation enrollment that is used for that 5-year average for assessment, you can see the change and you can see the difference between FY22 to today with regards to the number of students participating in the school district from each of our member towns. Stowe used to have a much larger number, as we discussed at the meeting last night with the select boards. Stowe has a stable residential population. So as students get older and graduate from our system, there's not new students coming in at the same rate, and you can see the change there. And sort of what we have now is we have almost a sort of leveling of enrollment over time across our district. So therefore, the result on the variable assessment, again, I'd call out the sort of the gaps between, Stowe, Bolton, and Lancaster back in FY22. You can see that those are narrowing while they're all still going up. There's this narrowing, which is, again, due to the fact that there's the change in the 5-year rolling average, which is becoming a more level enrollment share across the 3 towns. So again, this is just a repeat of where our budget is at, and you can see that we've hit our marks as far as where we were trying to be with our assessments, even though we're a little bit higher on our operating budget. Again, that's due to the decrease in cost, but also the fact that we increased one of our revenue levers as an estimate. So this is the sort of the major slide here. Our non-salary special education services, insurance and benefits changes, and the fact that our school choice and charter tuition obligations came in much higher makes up about $3.3 million. The difference between the FY25 voted budget and the current proposed budget is about $3.5 million. So all but $150,000 in increase is due to these 3 major areas that we don't have a lot of levers or control over. We're mandated to provide services to our students who have the highest amount of need and need services and accommodations and modifications in order to participate in education, whether it's in one of our buildings or in a different placement. Our insurance and benefits is obviously mostly driven by our rates and our expectations on those. And then obviously school choice and charter tuitions is dictated to us, and that's the increase.
I want to reiterate on that slide, Mr. Mulcairn, that when we look at this, you can see that the cost of being $3.35 million on special education, non-salary, insurance and benefits, school choice and charter tuitions means the increase for the rest of the budget is $160,000. That means that all the cuts that we've made to get to this point in the budget, when you remove those 3 factors, is a level funded budget, not even a level service budget. So I just wanted to point that out. The remaining cost beyond that is $160,000.
So this is our work ahead. And then obviously beyond the vote by our school committee, it goes to the town meetings. And obviously we'll be in attendance from there on. And so that brings us to the end of the presentation. And, don't want to speak for the superintendent, Bob, but I believe we're ready to take any questions.
That's right, Bob. Thank you.
Great. Well, Superintendent Downing and Mr. Mulcairn, thank you very much for this presentation and the detailed walkthrough of all this information. That was a great presentation. And I also want to say thank you for all the work you've done to get the budget where it is. I know it's been a very challenging year, and you had to make some tough decisions. And we appreciate all the work that went into getting us to where we are at this point. Okay, so we'll open it up to questions or comments. If anyone has a question or comment, please use the little raised hand thing so we can try to keep this.
Mr. Chair, would you like us to leave the slide deck up there as a reference tool?
I suspect we're going to have to be referencing slides, so yes, please. Okay, Mr. Trussell, you're first. Go for it.
Thank you. If you could put up the slide is right at the end there, I believe, the percentage in dollar increase per town.
Correct.
Thank you. The 7.47%. We're talking percentages now. Increase, not dollars. Can you explain how, if Stowe is building 300 homes and Bolton is building 200 homes and we're building 32 homes, that our valuation has gone up so great that we have a greater percentage increase? How is that evaluation done? And explain to the Lancaster residents what it is about us that makes us a higher valuation. Can anyone explain that?
Mr. Trussell, I'll give my best shot at it, but I'm going to confess I'm not an expert in state finance on this. But in looking at, I do know Mr. Boyle has put a fine presentation together on this in the past as well. The equalization value of the towns is determined by the total value of the assets in those towns. So it's taken the market value of the homes in the towns, the excise taxes, and it comes up with a general number at the state level. And then that number is then essentially divided by the population of the towns to come up with an equalization value of the town. What I think you're seeing in terms of these increases, though, aren't necessarily related as greatly to the equalization value of the towns as it is as enrollment changes have happened over time. Mr. Mulcairn, can you go back to the enrollment slide where we see the three lines come together? Right there. So if you can see just 5 years ago, and there was contraction that was going on before this. If you recall, in FY21, the town of Stowe actually had an assessment go down, which is nearly unheard of. But it has to do with the number of students that are participating in the school district on the 5-year rolling average. And as the town of Stowe's census, in other words, their population of school-aged students between 5 and 18 have gone down, Bolton and Lancaster have remained level. You can see Bolton actually went down for a little bit while Lancaster went up. So now they're essentially equal. So the Lancaster share has been rising over time from essentially a 30% share to a 33% share. So it's the combination of those factors that impact the percentage of those assessments. And that is determined by the regional agreement, which was recently ratified by all three of our towns as the methodology used to determine the variable assessment for each of our towns.
I don't have a problem with anything you've explained, except that I've been informed that it had to do with potential, with open land, with because we have not changed anything in this town, unfortunately, as far as commerce, etc.
Yeah, so to that point, Mr. Trussell, is I did take a look at the equalization values just recently, and they appear stable over the last couple of years, being at 69% for the town of Lancaster. And of course, Stowe is at the ceiling of 82.5, and Bolton is just over 80%. So they don't have the space in the future to grow. If their towns become more wealthy, the state will always contribute, according to the Chapter 70 formula, 17.5% of the required contribution. So there's some space there, but I would attribute these percentage increases less to the equalization of the towns and the values of the property. And I would equate it more to the percentage of enrollment that the town of Lancaster is simply participating at greater rates in the school system than they were previously.
Okay, I accept that, and I would like to just add, before I get off, I think this school board, budget warrant committee, and certainly the superintendent, et cetera, have done a tremendous job. When you take 160,000 on a $66 million budget that's controllable, that's not 3%. That's not 0.3%. That's 0.03%. An outstanding job. Thank you very much for all the hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Trussell.
Okay, Don Cole, you were next. Go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, I'd like to echo what our friend just said. This is a huge undertaking. I've done these kind of things before, and they are not easy. You've done a great job. I was wondering a couple of quick numbers questions is what do you expect the 2026 enrollment to be?
Thank you, Don. We do look to be, we're anticipating level, but I will tell you, Mr. Cole, that our current kindergarten enrollment is trending under what recent years has been. So I know at the high school level, we're actually going to go up maybe 5 to 10 students. So the high school will be level. The overall district will go down, and that's likely because as we graduate a class of approximately, 215 students, right now we only have 175 kindergartners scheduled to come in. So that delta between graduating seniors and incoming kindergartners is where the decreased enrollment would come from.
Yeah, I've been seeing a decrease in enrollment for the past 4 or 5 years, so I thought that might continue. I was just curious and doing some statistical work.
Mr. Cole, I'm going to point you to, and I know you're a regular attendee of our budget and warrant subcommittee, so it may come up there, but when we come to have our school choice hearing in April, I always bring out the census numbers to show how we're doing that. So I'll be updating our committee on those census numbers. So keep your eye out at that time.
So school choice hearings in April.
April, yes.
Okay. Also, I was wondering on the number of people that are over time that have been involved in the placement and special transportation. How many are we shuffling around now? Is that increasing? I would assume it is also along with the costs.
That's a good question. I recently spoke with Ms. Loran DeManch, our Director of Student Services, on that. Our number has not changed significantly over the last 5 years. The exact number, Mr. Cole, if I gave you a number, I could most likely be wrong with that, but we can certainly get that for you. I do know it's remained relatively level.
Okay.
Now, what I will say is that it can remain level, but if the cost of the school that the student needs to go to, we have some students that go in an outplacement where the cost of tuition is $100,000 a year. We have some that it's $300,000. Those are residential type placements. So the complexity of the case matters in that number as well.
Okay.
I would also, if I could just add in a variable too, Mr. Cole, is that sometimes if our student's going to an out of district placement, sometimes they can get on a van and there might be 2 other students on that van, and that's a cost share. Sometimes they're the only student. So it depends upon some of these factors of where the student needs to go based on their educational need and other students in nearby communities that could be on that van or not be on that van based on the AVC collaborative. So there's just a lot of variables in the air when these things happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Kevin Gross had a question. Kevin, go ahead.
Yes, just so obviously insurance is a huge driver of the cost increases this year. Could you say a little bit about the rationale for that increase and what our options are for alternatives or for getting that number back down?
Mr. Mulcairn, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, certainly. Again, so Mr. Gross, I'd go back to that. Oops. Let me go back to that slide for you. So we built the budget based on a 12% increase because that was near the high end of the range that we've seen the last couple of years. That's published by Maya mid-January. And I put it at the high end, anticipating that we're all under the umbrella of high cost of insurance. And the range came in much higher. The issue that we're facing is that for the amount of money that we pay in premium out of the school district, our sort of expectation and this the expectation across Maya is that you use 88% of it on healthcare costs during the year. We, as a district, as employees, used 97% of that premium that was paid towards healthcare costs. So the 12%, that is the administrative lens of that calculation and whatever other costs go in there, wasn't 12%. It got shrunk to under 3%. And now our rate has to increase in order to make that up. It's the world of healthcare insurance. As far as other options, I'm hesitant to say that there's an easy option out there. We are hearing from a neighboring nearby district that I had asked them based on this number, where are you at? And they felt like things were going to be good, and they gave me the name of the group that they use, and they just got their information, and it's looking like close to 25%. I cannot predict an easy answer on this. We already worked with our unit A and unit C last year to add deductible to the plan. That helped. In order to change that, it would have to be a significant increase. We've looked in the past at how do you tweak prescription copays? How do you tweak specialist copays? And really the difference is just not there. And per the contracts, there has to be a sort of a ratified agreement that we're going to change any aspect of the plan. So this is not something that I can do in isolation or central office can do in isolation based upon our collective bargaining agreements.
And do we have any
Mr.
options in
Gross.
terms of different providers, vendors, or whatever the correct term is?
Yeah, Mr. Mulcairn, will you explain our healthcare advisory committee and that we're going to be pulling that group together?
Yeah, we're going to speak with our insurance advisory committee. So we put that group together last year. It had not been together, I think, in 5 or 6 years before that. So essentially that has to be members of our Unit A, our teachers unit, and our Unit C, which is our instructional assistants, paraprofessionals, kitchen staff, custodial staff, secretarial admin staff, and at least one member of our school committee and the administrative, which is myself and the human resources department. So we would have to look and shop and see what's available. But again, it would have to get agreed upon and ratified under a memorandum of understanding or an agreement in order to make that happen. There has to be consensus there. And I respect the collective bargaining agreement to not try to put forward a statement today that I think we could do something, because I don't know that the temperature in the room is going to be on any of that. We're going to model out and show folks across the system, whether they're in a collective bargaining group or not, this is the impact of your health insurance increase next year. So if you're in a family plan under this plan, this is the increase. If you're individual under another plan, this is the increase. So I think when people have more time to digest it, there may be some room. We are on short time with a budget vote with school committee is the other compounding factor, because these rates come in so late in our budget season.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Trussell, you have another question.
Yes, it's a simple, quick one, probably for Ross. And Don Cole might be interested. There was a recommendation for OPEB to go up 50% of previous year. Was that done, or was it set aside this year for a budget decrease?
No, and I think it was not set aside, Mr. Trussell, and the increase recommendation contribution by $25,000 a year. We're going to continue to do that. And I think this is sort of the intelligence of that plan is $25,000 is not a significant amount. It's not insignificant either. So it makes an impact on our trust to offset the liability, while at the same time, I think it's digestible even in difficult budget seasons like this.
Yes, fully agreed. Thank you.
Hey, Don, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. If you look back at the January 19th original presentation, you can see that it is in there and with the increase.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Everyone's good? All right, well, Kirk and Ross, thanks again for the great presentation. It's been very helpful. And we look forward to the next couple of updates and the vote coming up in a couple weeks here.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. And I want to thank all three of our boards here. I know Bob, Ross and I have had a chance to meet with you. We've had a chance to meet with Dick. Brian, we want to extend that invitation to you as well. If there's anything we can do in terms of keeping the conversation going with your boards, we would be happy to entertain those conversations. So let's just stay in good communication.
Great. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. I don't think anyone has a quorum here, so we don't need to formally adjourn anything, but we'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank